Hello, I'm Miles, the creative director at Otyugra, on behalf of the team with a special video for our newsletter audience, but will be put onto our YouTube channel on a later date, as I feel like that would be fair to everybody. If you are watching this from our channel, consider subscribing to our newsletter so that you can get content kind of like this. This video is to highlight 5 new items that we recently added to the game over the course of the last 2 months. Each one of the items are unique and therefore worth spotlighting, I think. Before I continue with the list, I'd like to make sure that you're reminded this is a game about dungeon crawling first and foremost, so the footage you see and the gameplay you can expect is very much focused on exploration and battling, or perhaps more accurately, surviving. The first item is the Quantamatrix, which is a futuristic device that teleports you one time to a different place on the floor that you're currently on when you use the item. The item can teleport you anywhere on the floor, as long as there is a open spot for you to appear, which means that you can be as far as the farthest point from you, or teleport to a spot directly next to you, in doing so not causing you to teleport very far whatsoever. This random new teleportation is useful because it can allow you to escape a bad situation, or it can help you to get closer to where you want to go if you use it when you have just first entered a floor and want to go further along into the floor. It's uncommon, but sometimes the device will explode. The explosion itself does not impact you per se, instead it will teleport to a different place in the floor and then explode. The explosion can be quite chaotic in that it does a lot of damage, and there is no predicting where it's going to be, so it can potentially attack a foe that's far away or nearby. It can even attack a party member if it lands in the spot next to you where the party member is. Sometimes, an explosion can even destroy a non-essential item that's lying on the floor. When a dud happens for a Quantamatrix, it can leave the player in a very bad situation, as the player is likely to want to use the Quantamatrix in a sticky situation, and for it to, on a rare occasion, not perform what you expect it to, you as the player would end up being stranded in a very bad place where you were expecting to leave. This keeps the player thinking on their toes and having to sometimes devise new strategies on the fly. The second item is a mystical pouch of sleep sand. It can put multiple enemies to sleep as it spreads out directly in front of the direction that you face when you use the item to affect the first space in front of you and then the space behind that, so the sand jets out in a straight line, in other words. If you happen to throw the sleep sand at your ally, then it will naturally put your ally to sleep just like it would anyone else, meaning that sleep sand affects any living creature. This causes a status effect called deep sleep, which is different from normal sleep in that it's a lot like a coma. Once someone is put into deep sleep for a couple turns, not literally 2 turns, but for many turns, they are asleep with no ability to wake up until time passes, and at the end of this period, they quietly transition into a normal lighter sleep. At that point, a disturbance can wake them up, or without any disturbances, they may stay asleep for quite a long time. The third item, I actually don't know how to pronounce because I took the word from its proper name, is the Acai Berry, which is the berries that a palm tree will grow, and in this particular place where it comes from, you find this item in a swamp location, which is quite similar to where an acai berry would grow naturally. This item is unique out of the 5 as that it's very simple and it doesn't have any side effects. You simply eat it if you want to restore hunger. And unique to this particular item is that it can be used 2 times before it's all used up, whereas every item that I talk about except for this one only has 1 use. In Dream Prison Wanderer, the player has to worry about their satiety, which is a word that more or less means the opposite of hunger. So to put it another way, the more hunger that the character has, then the closer they get to a point in which they begin to take damage from hunger. That is what we call starvation, of course. When the player enters starvation, they become at a far greater risk of death than in just about any other situation you can find yourself in. Being poisoned is less bad than for your character to start to starve. Starvation very quickly will kill you and is very, very difficult to avoid unless you remedy the situation directly by eating food to restore your satiety. The Acai Berry does not restore your stomach's satiety very much. It's a very small food item, and there will be other food items in the game that restore significantly more, that are bigger items that you can be more lucky if you come across that instead. Item number 4 is the Vial of the Gemini, a vial or a potion, if you will, that contains 2 different liquids that are both identical in appearance. When you use the item, one of the 2 liquids will enter your body if you swallow it, which means that depending on which of the 2 liquids you swallow has a radically different effect. One of the 2 liquids is a poison. In the event that your character is already poisoned, then you just continue to be poisoned and nothing happens. If you drink the potion and it turns out to not be the poison but is instead the healing liquid, then you not only recover some of your blood back, but you also are cured of poison, which means that having multiple versions of this item is very useful, as drinking it the first time might poison you, but then drinking a second vial of the Gemini might mean that you drink the other liquid and in doing so recover from poison and also heal ultimately. This is currently the only healing item in the game, which means that the player has to rely very heavily on it, even though it has a very nasty side possibility. Item number 5 is the Mean Bean. Its sillier name is a result of the fact that my co-designer and I have been discussing whether or not we want to have an item that is a little bit more on the humorous side, to perhaps shake up the dark and horrific setting, and to perhaps give the game a little bit more variety, or something that's very unexpected from the circumstance and atmosphere that has been shown to the player up until that point. This item drains the stomach completely, meaning that one turn after you use the item, your stomach is completely empty and you begin starvation, which, as I said, is a very, very deadly thing. You might be thinking to yourself, then why would anyone want to eat a Mean Bean if it's such a devastating item? Well, it also has a very good effect. It buffs your damage done, and at the moment the item does a 2.5 times buff. So if you do 8 damage, then now suddenly you're doing 20 damage, which in the context of the situations you find yourself in, that extra amount of damage in a single turn can be a lifesaver. This is a very last resort item, and as such we're thinking perhaps that we'll change it later on if the playtesters don't like how it's currently operating. The Mean Bean is very useful if you find yourself surrounded by many enemies, as that is, in my experience thus far, the easiest way to die while in a dungeon. So those are the 5 items. As I said, they've been made very recently, and they are made all together because we are putting together a event for our playtesters, which requires us to make a lot of content as a test of the bigger game to come. This is to be for a small demo of sorts, and to use a big fancy word, this is a microcosm of the game as a whole, and as such, we would like for the items that we put into the game to be very varied and interesting and a good representation of the items you can expect from the whole game, which means that this video is also a pretty good crash course on telling you about the kind of items you can expect to see when the full game is released. All 5 items are meant to reflect the theming of this game, which is a bad dream, and dreams have a habit of being very twisting and turning. In a very short amount of time, a dream can change radically. Likewise, sometimes dreams can be very extraordinary and fantastical, while other times a dream can be very boring and realistic and lifelike, and so naturally we have items that reflect the both of those. Some of the items in the game so far have been very ordinary and straightforward, whereas some other items in the game have been very complicated and add a twist to the game, as in they have a big grand effect that cause a turning point in the gameplay. So that's everything. Before you click out of the video, I humbly ask that you continue to read our newsletter, or that you just subscribe to the newsletter using the link that's below. As a reminder, we sometimes also put supplemental content on Twitter, our website, and YouTube. But I want to emphasize that our newsletter is the best and most substantial place to find information about Dream Prison Wanderer. Again, this has been Miles, and thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.